Okay, so once again, good morning, everyone. I think our topic for today is very important, especially today, no? So, the internet is a communication facility designed to connect computers together so that they can exchange digital information. So, data carried across the internet is organized into packets which are independent units of data, complete with delivery instruction attached in the first part of a header of the packet. So the internet provides a basic communication service that conveys these packets from a source computer to one or more destination computers. And additionally, the internet provides supporting services such as naming of the attached computers or the DNS, domain name services or the DNS. A number of high-level services of or applications have been designed and implemented making use of this basic communication service, including the World Wide Web, internet, email, the internet actually, the news group, distribution of audio and video information, games, file transfer, and login between distant computers. So the design of the internet is such that new highly level services can be designed and deployed in the future. So an application program on a computer that needs to deliver data to another computer invokes software that breaks that data into some number of packets and transmit this package one at a time, of course, in the internet. So a number of application support services are defined that can assist applications by performing these functions, and most commonly the transmission control protocol. So again, internet users tend to use the term internet to describe the totality of the experience, including the application. But to a network engineer, the internet is a packet transport service provided by one set of entities, the ISP, and the application run on top of that service and as a general provided by a different set of entities, like application providers. And it is important to distinguish the internet as a packet forwarding mechanism from the applications that run on top of the mechanism. It is also important from the application actually, and to distinguish the internet from the technology that support it, because the internet is not a specific communication or technology such as fiber optics or radio. It makes use of this and other technologies in order to get packets from place to place. The internet was intentionally designed to allow as many technologies as possible to be exploited as part of the internet and to incorporate new technologies as they are invented. So again, the heart of the internet. Wait, I'm accepting your classmate. Oh my God. What happened? Okay, again, this topic is very important at present. So to give us more details about the topic, let us all welcome Sir Alan Glenn. Take it away, sir.
Yes, sir. Once again, a pleasant good morning, Sir Marmelo, my fellow classmates. Once again, I'm Alan Glenn Moldes. I'm going to discuss Lesson 7, Internet System Design. Siguro before I start, kung may additional information kayo regarding with my subject or my topic, we can interact na lang po siguro sa class later. As I start, Internet System Design, I'm going to discuss the structure and the components of the Internet systems and the technologies and languages involved in the Internet System Design, including XHTML or the Extensive Hypertext Markup Language, the JavaScript, the JSP or the Java Server Page, the servlets, and the Flash. In Internet System Design, we have also to discuss the fundamentals of the Internet system, design of the Internet system, and also the design process for the Internet system. for the fundamentals of internet system, we are aware that computers are very important to us nowadays. We can say that the internet and computers or gadgets, this is our basic necessities na po para sa ngayon, lalo na during this pandemic. Many software systems today operate across the internet, allowing users to access the system from any internet-connected computers with the browser anywhere in the world. Yun nga po, nowadays, napaka-importante po ng internet sa atin for buying foods, communication, buying our personal needs, even in transportation, and most important in studying. So these systems are more than just a software. Their visual presentation and information content aspects are often just as important as their capabilities to respond to requests to the user request. There are three forms of the development for the internet system. Number one is the development of the software, which receives information from the users, processes information, and returns information to the client. Dito po sa development of the software, ito po yung dito yung the client and the internet interaction. And sa process information po, this is usually on the server side of the interaction, where the databases and the other critical resources of the system resides. Next is the development of the visual appearances and behavior of the web pages interfacing to the client by using animation software such as Flash. Next is deciding on the information content of web pages, the choice of words to use, what information to emphasize. Under the fundamentals of internet system, we have the two main ways in which the client side of an internet application send information to the server. We have the get and the post. For the get, it is mainly used to extract the information from the server. The get request and send information to the server as the part of the request of the URL. While in the post request send information to the server in a separate message body. Meaning the post is more secure because of the data being transmitted is not visible to the browser URL display. The post also requests the use for the updating server data, maybe entering details from a form into a database. The advantages of the get, where the browsers can cache the result of the get queries, so making the display of the same results faster. However, the disadvantage naman po ng get is yung some browser may place a limit of length of a URL, although there are restricting the amount of data that can be appended as a part of the get request. This is the typical structure of the internet typical structure of the internet application. In this case, the data is sent using GET to the server-side program, a Java servlet specified in the action of a clause. The servlet will receive this data and add the new user and their preferences to the database of the users. It will send back to the client browser a web page, including an acknowledgement that the registration was successfully and giving further option, such as the example for this is yung mag-search ka ng database for a property. Moving forward for the internet system technologies, we can say that internet system technologies, this is a large number of softwares, technologies, and languages exist to support the construction of all elements of the internet system, which may be conveniently divided into the client side. Bali, ma-divide siya sa client side and the server side technologies. For the client side technologies, first is the Java. This is a JavaScript. This is a Java-like scripting language which execute on the client. Wait lang po. On the client when the client browser views web pages containing embedded JavaScript. Sa JavaScript naman po, there are numbers of similar languages. Example po nito yung Microsoft JScript and BB script based on the Visual Basic instead of the Java. Sa Java rin po, we can use to check that yung mga forms are valid before the form information is sent to the server by HTTP GET or POST message. It can also be used to animate web pages by responding to the events such as the mouse cursor moving over the page element. Next is the Flash, an animation language for web pages which allows movie-like visual effects be embedded in pages. Sa Flash naman po, a Flash po, we can be use it for making page look more visually appealing. Yung mapukaw pansin, parang ganon. Appealing and distinctive, and also to increase the numbers of user in a website. Siguro kasi di ba pag makikita natin, pag pupunta tayo sa isang internet web pages, pag kami nakita tayong mga nagpa-flash, yung mga parang animation, siguro mas nakakainganyo to ng mga client or ng user sa isang web pages. Moving for the server side, we have the JSP or the Java server pages. These embed Java statements in the HTML. These statements are executed on the server when the page receives a request from a client browser. Sa JSP naman po, the result of the processing are returned as web pages lang po. Next is the active server pages. Server-side scripting for Windows servers using Visual Basic as the scripting language. In the ASP, scripts to be executed on the server are embedded in the web pages that trigger them and can access and update the server data directly. As the result of this po, yung result ng processing, it will presented as by generating a web pages and are returning this into a client browser. For the PHP or the hypertext processor, an open source, platform independent, server-side scripting language with powerful facilities for string matching and manipulation using regular expressions. Comparing with the JSP and the ASP for PHP, as with ASP and the JSP, database query and updates mechanism are provided, and the output naman for the client is by a web page generated by a script. For the servlets, this is a pure Java server-side technology. The methods of servlet classes respond to the HTTP GET and POST request and generate web pages which are returned to the client or to display on the client browser. Next, we have the online databases. We can say that online databases, this is the yung essential form of many simple internet system, which the data is stored on the server that can be queried or augmented or modified by a web page interfaces. There are the following characteristic actions which the client of such system may do. Number one is to create. To create is to add a new instance of an entity to the database or add a new row to a table in a TBC class of our relational databases. Next is to delete or to remove an existing instance of an entity or a row from a table. Next is to edit, to modify or one or more attributes of the instance row in the databases. To check, to compare the values entered in the form to the database values. Next, example po ng check natin, yung sa internet po, kung mapapansin natin, yung pagka nagla-login tayo, yung password user and login, di ba may mga nagpo-prompt doon pagka mali yung mga password na ini-enter natin or mali yung mga username na i-enter natin. Next is to the list. It display all rows of the table, instances of an entity which satisfies certain properties. Next, an add. An add is an instance to a role set by creating a foreign key link from a table row and the role end to a table row at the other end of the association. Next is the remove. The remove is an instance from a role set. We have also the after this, we have also the submit action, wherein the submit action on the web page also display a client to initiate one of the operation. The processing of which is mainly take place to the server are essential to involve the database of the system. Moving forward to the next topic in the internet system design, the design of the internet system. The following are the steps needed when a system is to be developed as an online application. Transport the PIM of the system into IPSM oriented to online implementation by determining which entities and associations are to be persistent, stored in the databases or some other permanent data storage. And if a relational databases is to be used, transforming the classes associations to produce a relational database schema. Next is to identify the new entities. This is often derived directly from the persistent entities, which represent data groups to be entered or presented on the web pages. In this case, of input data, the entities will have an operation corresponding to the submit action on the web page. This operation should be stereotyped with one of the above action, the create, the delete, the list, and if possible, the other operations such as the reset or to clear all the text built up in the empty string. It may also be present for an entity representing an input form. Next is identify invariants of the system. We have the invariants of entities representing web forms, express validity criteria for the data input into the form. Also, the invariants of the entities representing persistent data corresponds to the integrity constraints on the databases. The invariants linking view and repository data express the functionality of the system, how it responds to submit an action or to the other client-side actions. We considered this of the interaction between the users and the system, and the presentation of the information is particularly critical in this case of the internet system. We have also to consider what information to present on the web pages, how to explain what data is to be entered, or how to display the output of an operation. The visual design of the system should be consistent across all over the web pages of the system. We should enhance rather than interface with the user use of the internet system and should be take an account of accessibility standards. Moving for a client design as web page design issues. Design of the visual and the information content of the web pages involves consideration of the following issues. Number one is the aesthetics. These aesthetics that the pages project as positive image of the organization that are designed for. In aesthetics po, the page design may be used as a wide variety of styles and constructing approaches. This range also may from the style borrowed from the other media such as newspaper formats or in the MSN or the Amazon front pages to verify individual in the idiosyncratic formats based on the one or two striking images, multimedia elements, and sparse textual content. Next, the usability that the users can effectively use and navigate through the website to find information or services that they require. The usability, same principles of usability also applies to conventional software system. This may also apply to the web system. The users should be able to achieve each of the functions that the system is supposed to support without excessive effort. This means that the information should be presented in a clear manner, that the command button should be instantly recognizable, such as that they have a meaningful names and to identify their functions. Next is the portability. The web pages or equivalent versions of them should be viewable under the number of different browsers. Because of many users try to access the system using an existing browsers, including archaic version of the browsers, the system developer must take care of to ensure that their web pages will render reasonably well on the many browser as possible. We have also the portability problems with the web pages. This may include the scripting languages such as the JavaScript executing correctly in one browser but not in another. The colors and the positioning of the page elements, the display differently on the different browsers. Also, the XHTML features may vary between browsers. For example, nito yung blinking text does not work under the internet yung Internet Explorer, but in the same browsers still do not support frames. For those no frames that can be used also to provide an alternative presentation on the web pages. Also, the tags needed to achieve a particular effect are different in different browsers. The solution of this is one of the general solutions to this problem is to provide an alternative version of a website for different browsers and switch to the appropriate page when the browsers being used has been detected using a navigator or the attribute of the browsers. To avoid the need of the separate versions of the pages, a developer can try to restrict the features using the pages or to a subset that will display correctly whatever browser it may use. And lastly, the accessibility. That the users with different abilities such as an older or disabled users should be able to use the web pages. Siguro sa accessibility, yun nga po yung mga kailangan yung web pages natin na pwede mo siya magamit ng mga disabled. This is another issue which should be taken into a consideration to consider. Users of the system may also have different abilities or maybe partially sighted, color blinded, or having hearing impairments. To achieve this accessibility by such users, a web page developer should, number one, ensure there is a good contrast between the colors used in their pages. Between the background color, the images, and the colors used for the unvisited and the visited links. Next is to ensure the minimum font size reasonably large. Maybe yung advisable natin is yung mga 12 point para mas maintindihan na nakakarami, and to avoid the absolute specification of the fonts instead of define them as a percentage for a default font size. Next is to ensure that the images and the other visual elements such as the animation have alternative text description so that the screen readers can still communicate the information about the visually impaired readers. Next is similarly explanatory text can be added to the audio elements of a web page, which enables captions to be displayed or explaining the elements for the users who are deaf or maybe in hard of hearing. By improving a website to make it more accessible for the disabled users, we can also improve its usability for the users. It may be also a legal requirements in some circumstances to help to avoid legal action. Moving for the client-side design in the JavaScript. There are two primary uses of JavaScript in an internet application. Number one is to provide interactive features on a web page, such as messages with pop-up when the mouse cursor moves over a command button on the page to explain the purpose of the command. Next is to carry out some of the application processing on the client side in order to reduce the loads on the server. Typically, this involves a series of application processing on the client side in the order to reduce the load of the server. Typically, this involves a series of checks on form data to prevent the form being submitted with incomplete or clearly invalid data. Another client-side design, the images map. An image map designated areas within an image as a link. This can be a normal HTML links either to the other parts of the same documents or to the different documents. Example nito, siguro papasin natin, di ba, pag nag-browse tayo ng internet, pag nakiklik pa lang tayo ng images, dinedirect na rin tayo nito sa isang link. When a point within the designated area of the images is clicked on, the link is also activated and the browser also display the link into a document. Interaction design using state charts. State charts have an important role to play in describing the interaction behavior of an internet system in terms of what sequence of pages are displayed to a user and the effect of the user in the commands. This transition are labeled with events of this transition also labeled with the events that corresponds to a user commands or a link that can be selected in a source. For the server-side design, the Java servlets. Servlets are Java classes which responds to HTTP requests and carry out actions on the server, such as modifying data in the repository of the system or generating response pages as XHTML text files, which are then returned to the client for the display of the client browsers. Within the server-side components, the code that actually generates web pages from the code should be separated from the code that manage the flow of the control. This code may directly manage also the database that should be separated from both these as well. So these are this is servlets versus the JSP. This is the comparison. But advantage of the servlets, it may conceptually simple. Disadvantage naman po ng servlets, this requires Java programming skills. As advantages of the JSP, it is easy to integrate content and visual appearance with the programming. Disadvantage of the JSP comparing to servlets, it is hard to debug, delay on the first access to a page due to compilation. For the server, again, for the server-side design, in the web page definitions, the generated web pages returned by a server to a client can be constructed as objects of suitable Java classes, classes whose features represent elements of the web pages such as forms and form fields. Example po nito within a single application such as property search system. The pages may also generated by a system usually have a common feature such as images, the layouts, the text or the buttons, and all of these common features can be placed in a superclass which is inherited by classes of representing pages of the system. Again, for the server-side design, using JSP to generate web pages instead of the web pages generation classes such as the HTML page, JSP file can be used as templates of the required web pages with additional embedded Java statement to provide dynamic page functionality. Example nito is yung page content has to vary depending also on a database data. We also have to take note that the database new update code is separated out into an entity beans invoked from the JSP representing data. The instances of the entities is what's to be being processed. Server-side design, defining SQL statements, whatever database is chosen for the persistent data store of a system, it is usually report the use of the SQL for reading and writing data. The SQL or a query, this is a query language. Query means for retrieval. The SQL provides simple programming languages using statements such as update, the select, the delete. For the last topic of the internet system design, the design process for the internet system. These are the complete design process for the internet system using all the techniques described in the previous sections consists of the following steps. Number one is to define PIM, abstract data model of the entities involved. Next is to define PIM use cases describing the operations required from the system. Next is the transform data model into PSM appropriate for a data storage approach to be adopted. Next is define entities representing web pages based on what operations are to be provided. An input page should only require users to enter the minimal information necessary to support the operation it is involved in. Next is the define the page invariants and any client-side scripts to check or to enforce this. To define the user's interaction sequence of pages using state charts. Next is the define the visual design and information content of the pages. This should be usually consistent in a style across an application. Next is a complete prototype of a client side of a system can be produced at this point and reviewed. This should be include checks that accessibility and portability requirements had been met, and evaluation involving usability trials with typical users. Next is the define which pages are to be hard-coded in a XHTML and which are to be generated. For generated pages, define an inheritance hierarchy of the classes representing the pages so that the pages with commonly subparts can be expressed as subclasses for a class with these subparts features as its features. Each generated page should have a class which can be used template by the server side of the system for constructing instances of the pages in the Java. define server-side response to PSU the code for each operation. Define SQL queries updates for virtual association. This can be based on the constraints defining the association. Number 13 last, to define the database interfaces to support operation required from the server side functional core components. This is the internet system development process. This process shows the dash arrows indicated the manual processes, and the solid lines, those solid lines are the automated or semi-automated processes. Many of these steps can be performed in a parallel or an in alternative orders to that listed. In particular, once the system operation have been specified, the client and the server-side designs can be proceed most independently. That's all for my report, sir. For the internet system design, this is the reference that I have been used. Sa reference ko po, may mga samples po dito. You can also rely for these references. Once again, good morning and thank you very much for listening.
Okay, so thank you very much for a well comprehensive discussions. No? Actually, no, the architecture, no, of the internet design is very important. No? In the economics of an internet ecosystem, architecture does play a significant impact. No? The primary interfaces define the potential relationships between the actors, whereas the architecture defines the industrial structure. So it's less apparent that what role architecture, if any, should play in supporting various money routing protocols. It's possible that we will have to wait another 20 years to see how the economy develops before we can evaluate what we should have done in the architecture now. So even with today's internet, we may not have the same ISPs in 20 years, but rather a different collection of actors attempting to work inside the existing framework. So if such is the case, economic forces will be driving force between that future. So I think that's it. Congratulations to the presenter.